fund an education. So again, the lifelong learning plan allows me to borrow money from my RRSP in order to fund an education. Again, each of a couple could do this, and if the couple decides to do this, then they are going to have to repay those amounts in the next 10 years after the education is completed. Now, the next thing we'll look at is what we call the spousal RRSP. It's possible not only for me to contribute to my own RRSP, but it is also possible to contribute to my spouse's RRSP. This would normally be done in a situation where we have one income earner who earns at a very high level and the other who earns at a lower level. The advantage here is we would not be loading up all of the RRSP contributions with this higher income earner, because as we said, the money coming out here is going to be taxed. So if you have one person, of a retired couple for example, who has this much RRSP, they're also going to be taxed at this level. The other person would be taxed at this level, which is not a bad thing. However, we'd be better off to bring them down to each a middle tax bracket, which is generally going to be more favorable because of the way that tax brackets work in Canada. So, we would, in order to take advantage of that, or in order to facilitate that, we could use the spousal RRSP. And when we contribute to a spousal RRSP, we're typically going to have the higher income earner contribute to the lower income earner's RRSP, now building a spousal RRSP. And that higher income earner will get a tax deduction for that, just as if that person had contributed to their own RRSP. The lower income earner owns the RRSP, although there are some liquidity restrictions. We may be restricted on how much money we can take out in the next 2 years after any contribution has been made. And the higher income earner will have their RRSP contribution room reduced as a result of having made those contributions. One other thing we need to talk about here, because this is of course a life insurance course, something we have to be thinking about, is what happens to our RRSP, or for that matter, our RIF on death. Well, if you happen to be somebody who has no surviving spouse, nor dependent children, nor grandchildren, or if you have any of those folks but you haven't named them as beneficiaries, then what will happen is, as we would suspect, the government says we have not yet had our opportunity to tax those dollars, we had best do that now. So the government will fully tax those amounts on death. Now, that might not be exciting for everybody, so there are some ways to reduce that tax or to defer it until later on. Ideally, we would like to leave this money to a beneficiary who can help us to reduce that tax burden. That only happens if we can leave it to a surviving spouse or to a dependent child or grandchild. And if we can leave it to those folks, what will happen then is it will roll into, if I leave it to my surviving spouse, her RRSP or her RRIF. It won't be taxed at that time. However, my surviving spouse then would have to pay the tax on those dollars as they come out. So we don't avoid the tax in this case. We know we're still going to pay the tax. Revenue Canada is good that way. However, we will reduce our tax burden. And when we talk about the structure of income tax in another video, we'll see exactly why we gain that advantage by passing that money on to our surviving spouse rather than having it taxed all as a lump sum. So this provides a nice summary of the registered retirement savings plan. There are some details that you'll have to be aware of beyond this in order to expect to be successful on your exam. For example, what constitutes earned income for the purpose of calculating the RRSP contribution? When exactly can we take money out of a spousal RRSP? These are details that you will have to be aware of, and they're available in your study material. However, this provides a good overview of the structure of the RRSP. Thank you very much.